Edit that at the point where it starts sounding weird.
The first mention of race.
That's the one.
It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood, a beautiful day for a neighbor. Would you be mine? Could you be mine? I've always wanted to have a neighbor just like you. I've always wanted to live in a neighborhood with you.
Hello and welcome to episode 1471 of Please Won't You Be My Podcast. I'm Stephen Blandon. With me as always is a man who's sick and tired of my Graham Clark impression. Mr. Andrew Plant, everybody.
I am a little tired of your Graham Clark impression.
Okay, well, I'll stop.
That's alright. That was my Dave Shumka tone impression.
Right, yeah.
I'm like, what kind of thing would he say in response to that?
And there it was.
And that was the best I could do.
Alright, that's fine.
So, let's talk about Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood.
Yeah.
That's what we're here for.
Yeah, it's...
what year is it, Stephen?
It's 1980, I believe.
Ooh, Reaganism. Neon lights. Kind of blockish architecture.
Sure.
Donald Trump starting to make a name for himself.
Oh, don't even go there.
Yeah. I mean, Terminator probably came out-ish now.
Sure.
I don't know. I don't remember much of the 80s.
It's volume
1, episode 11.
Yep, 1471.
Thank goodness for the 5-day work week, keeping the math easy, huh?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so this is our first episode of the 1980s. It's been like a 10-year jump ahead just
Yeah,
about.
we've moved ahead a decade since
Yeah.
our last episode.
And my memory did not deceive. The model work has improved.
Oh, has it?
Yeah, the new model is not made out of cardboard, or if it is made out of cardboard, it disguises it better.
Okay.
And I don't know, I assume they've added to the outdoor set, because we see Mr. Rogers.
Yeah, we start out outside, and Mr. Rogers goes into his house and, like, waves into the house, and I'm like, no, we're out here.
Yeah, he, like, he walks past a couple houses onto his back porch.
Mm-hmm.
The porch is the same, but there's more, I assume, leading up to it.
Mm-hmm. I feel like this week is off to a good start.
Yeah, some good stuff.
I could barely keep up with my notes I was writing.
Yeah,
so much.
there's some stuff going on. First thing I have on my notes is the model works improved. The second thing I have is what a belt.
I didn't notice.
Mr. Rogers is wearing quite the belt.
Like a wrestling belt?
Like almost, no, but almost. He's got like, I feel like the belt itself is maybe not straight. I feel like it might have sort of like scalloped sides and maybe a pattern on it. The big thing is it's got this great big round belt buckle, which is like bright, and it's a very thick belt. It's a thicker belt than you would expect to see somebody wearing, not with like cowboy pants. It looks a lot like a cowboy belt.
Okay. So the first thing Mr. Rogers does is he shows us an electric synthesizer.
Yeah. He points out, or says, you probably noticed I didn't have anything in my hands when I walked in.
I guess last week he must have had props carrying.
I mean, I guess,
the whole time.
Thinking back on the episodes we've done, most of the times, he comes in.
I know he's brought in a lock one time.
He often comes in with something on his hand, and I don't know if it was ever stated as a theme of the show, but I think probably, like, when they're writing out the episode, one of the things that they hook onto is what will he bring to show the kids this week.
Show and tell.
Yeah. Yeah, the synthesizer. He's got a synthesizer.
He starts... It, to me, sounded like the Captain Comic theme song.
Oh, yeah, that's the Captain Comic theme song is the flight of the Marines, the Marine Corps March, I think.
Oh.
From the halls of Montezuma.
That's the one.
To the shores of Tripoli.
That's the one.
Yeah.
So he shows us flutes, oboes, tubas, and then he makes us see if we can identify them.
Yeah, I was hoping we would get more instruments, but it's just flutes, oboes, and tubas.
Yeah.
Which
it
is a nice. I like the tone on that synthesizer.
It was a primitive synthesizer compared to what we have today in the 21st century, but it was also had a lot of features that they don't always have these days. Like he demonstrated one at the end where he like dragged his fingers across them and
Yeah.
they blended together like
I
theremin.
imagine in that era it was probably like an analog synthesizer
I don't know.
as opposed to digital. I don't know a ton about synthesizer tech, but I think it was like analog. I really don't know a ton about synthesizer tech. And then he sings a song about looking and listening and what you might find.
Ask questions.
Now you have a better head for music than I. Is this the first? Have they added more instruments to the accompaniment
I wasn't paying attention.
since? Okay, because in my head it has been piano up until this point, but they had like drums. I noticed they had some bass going on the song. That was a good walking bass.
I'm not sure.
Which I'm a big fan of. The thing I have in my notes, though, is that the orchestration on this song, it feels like it's written for much bolder choreography than it's given. Like, there's a fair bit going around.
You think he needs a hat and a cane?
You could do a decent, like, sort of a jazzy dance number to this, but it's just a locked off camera with Mr. Rogers sitting on a bench singing this song.
Mm-hmm. Mr. McFeely shows up at the
Mr.
door.
McFeely shows up. I wrote down that today's theme is people not having things in their hands because Mr. McFeely is also delivering something which he doesn't have.
Yeah, Mr.
Okay.
Rogers says, I don't think I ordered anything. And I was like,
When-
this happens every day.
When has that ever been an issue? Mr. McFeely slowly starting to grow into his look.
Yeah. Mr. McFeely says that he knows that Mr. Rogers didn't order anything because this time it's a person delivery.
Yeah.
So this time it's Mr. McFeely's, I don't know, I wrote down Speedy, Chaperone, and People Shuttle.
Yeah, he says that person delivery is the best kind of delivery. Or something to
I
that
guess.
effect, which is, that's also human trafficking,
I feel like you need
depending
to,
on how that shakes out.
I feel like you need to take another refreshing look at your mission statement, Mr. McFeely. I feel like you've sort of lost sight of your business.
Mr. McFeely, he's still going, though, after all these years.
Mhm.
That's pretty good for a small... Does he think he's the founder of Speedy Deliveries? Or
Yeah,
does he
I'm
work
sure.
for somebody?
I
He certainly talks about it in the we sense, but that might just be trying to...
think if he was working
Trying to
for
project
somebody,
an
he
air of
would have
professionalism.
been fired 20 years ago.
I don't know. He's given a lot to that job, but you're right. That doesn't mean anything.
No, he's giving a lot, but not what the job asks for.
Well, well, I don't know. We don't know what the mission statement of Speedy Delivery is. I feel like if anybody's a company man, it's Mr. McFeely.
Does Mr. McFeely have a van, or does he still just have a bicycle? Like,
Sometimes I think he just walks.
did this person delivery?
I don't think he was biking with that goat.
Did he
20
just
years ago.
accompany this man to Mr. Rogers' house, or did this guy ride on the back of his
I
bike?
don't know. Maybe he just saw him on the street and he said, "Oh, I'll take credit for this."
I just have to see Mr. Rogers today, even though I don't have anything.
Yeah. Well, I gotta get my name in there. You can't let him forget you. That's the first rule.
Nobody's
of business.
using the postal service anymore in 1980. Now that the internet is
Yeah, right.
starting to rumble.
Everybody's using, I don't know, AOL Instant Messenger. No, that's the 90s. Everybody's using BBS systems.
Yeah.
They just head when you want to send your grandmother a note, you just head down to the local university. You
Mhm.
type it into the net, and it goes off to her nearest university,
Exactly.
and they ring her up and they say, "Your grandson sent you a note. Would you like me to read it to you, or do you want to come down and read it off of our green screen?"
No need for Mr. McMiddleman anymore.
Yeah, no.
And-
The internet is connecting people.
Yeah, it's all starting. And now Mr. McFeely is just out wandering the neighborhood without any packages, taking credit for delivering everything that arrives.
I was going all over the place in 81.
So the
person delivery,
a guy named J.O. Callahan,
J.O. Callahan,
professional storyteller.
professional storyteller.
Yep.
He dresses like any number of people who were on CBC
He dresses like
in our childhood.
Ernie and Bert.
Yeah. I feel like if you told me he hung out with like Eric Nagler and Fred Penner, I'd believe you. He's that sort of person.
Mm-hmm.
I guess it just means he's a guest character on a children's show.
Yeah.
Yeah, he tells stories professionally.
Do you think it shows? Is he worth that title?
In my notes, I guess it's an all right story, but I don't know if it's professional grade.
It's certainly a better story than most people I know could tell.
That's true.
I don't know if
true.
the
I thought
it was a very simple story.
I thought that for a professional storyteller, he told the story of how he became a professional storyteller. Not great. He
only tells fictional stories.
Which, to be fair, is not that much of a story. He used to tell stories to his kids.
Then
they ranged in length from 5 minutes to 2 hours. And he decided, I should do this for a living.
Yeah.
That's basically his story. So then he tells a story about a bubble.
That arrives in a
great big bubble.
kingdom.
He tells it in sort of a weird accent. He slips almost into like an English accent.
Yeah,
but not quite.
I thought he was like in the first. As soon as he starts into the story, he shifts his accent into like a very proper English accent, and I thought that like in a couple seconds, as soon as you identify the accent, that sort of set the scene without having any visuals. You were like, oh, I know I'm in a distant medieval sort of land.
I suppose.
Anyways, a bubble arrives in a medieval kingdom.
Big bubble shows up, and everybody's excited about the bubble.
Except for the king.
Except for the king, who thinks that the bubble is trouble.
And that is reprised throughout. Ultimately, 3 knights, a black knight, a green knight, and a red knight, all try to attack the bubble to get the king, who gets trapped inside the bubble.
See, you're getting this out of order. That's because you're not a professional storyteller.
It's true.
You're barely even professional podcasters.
They try to get him out of the bubble. It doesn't work. And then a girl comes along and pops it with her fingers.
Because she treats it like a bubble instead of like trouble.
The lesson of the story is, if you treat a bubble like a bubble, it acts like a bubble. But the the flip side of that coin is that if you don't treat a bubble like a bubble, it is something other than a bubble.
If you treat a bubble like trouble, then the bubble becomes trouble.
Right.
I mean, this is some real...
It's got some metaphorical value, but I don't know if literally it really checks out.
I mean, I feel like this plays into sort of the metaphysics of the land of make-believe.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of imagination and belief going into this story.
In prelude to this story, J. O'Callahan tries to blow some bubbles with a bubble wand.
It was an alright job. Not great.
No, he doesn't get any bubbles out. After the story, he gets 1 bubble out of this bubble wand.
Well, you got to breathe very differently to blow bubbles than you do to tell stories.
That's true. He's not a professional bubble blower.
He's not, which we'll get into, believe it or not.
So he's told the story and he leaves. Mr. Rogers
he's got to go
back inside.
Go to the school to tell a story.
But he
probably
gets
the same
to keep the bubbles? No, because Mr. Rogers gets to keep the bubbles.
Oh, that's true.
So he must be telling a different story at the school.
Yeah. Or maybe he's like, you know what, they're going to laugh at me if I try to blow bubbles at the school. I'll just paint bubbles with my words.
Kids are harsh. So Mr. Rogers goes back inside and plays with the bubbles. He is much better than
He's pretty good at bubbles.
Callahan.
Yeah. So Mr. Rogers calls the trolley.
Yep. They chat briefly.
Yeah, and he says, well, maybe there's bubbles in the land of make-believe. That might be fun. Let's go see that.
Yeah, he suggests to the trolley, hey, try to make some bubble talk happen in the land of make-believe.
Yeah, he gives his order directly to the trolley, which is an interesting way to do it.
And then we head straight into the land of make-believe.
So let's hop into the land of Man, what do you think's happened to the land of make-believe in 20 years? You think they still got that terrible waterfall?
I hope not.
Oh boy, that'd be crazy if they still had that terrible waterfall.
Do they still?
Still have that terrible waterfall.
Is it around for? Wow.
Yeah.
I definitely thought that thing was gonna die.
Nope, it is still there.
It's not functioning though.
No, it's not running, but you can see it sort of just left of screen. Yeah.
So here we are in the land of make-believe.
Here we are in the land of make-believe. That terrible waterfall's still there.
Man, a lot happens.
It is a busy day in the land of make-believe. I feel like
as soon as we touch down in the land of make-believe, I'm just scrawling notes.
We got
like mad. There's a lot of stuff to cover here.
3 distinct human beings walking around, which I think is a record.
Yeah.
I feel like they've upped the tourism. They're getting more traffic from sort of the non-natives of the land of make-believe.
So we start off with King Friday the 13th and Joe Negri.
And they're blowing bubbles.
And
Joe Negri's doing most of the bubble blowing for reasons of physiology.
Yeah. And then on the topic of bubbles, King Friday says, I recently heard this story about bubbles and about a king who was inside of a bubble.
Yeah, he was saying he'd like to have a great big bubble all around the balcony.
A bubble balcony, yeah.
Yeah.
And he said he thought that would be quite interesting.
Yeah. A real contrast, because at first I was drawing connections between the King in the story and King Friday.
Mm-hmm.
What with his, historical reaction to change and strange things.
Yeah, the King in the story wasn't really happy about this bubble.
No. But King Friday,
all over it.
Yeah, he's real into it. So I think he's mellowed out in his old age.
Joe Negri tries to talk him down. He says, King Friday, that story is just pretend. And King Friday leans in real close and says, Joe, so are we.
Yeah, it's amazing.
It was a beautiful moment.
It's fantastic.
Because King Friday really said the words that we were all thinking.
Yeah. He knows how the land of make-believe works.
Yeah, if it can happen in a story, it can happen in the land
of
make-believe.
And in fact, that comes back a number of times throughout this sojourn in the land of make-believe. So they're blowing some bubbles and talking about bubbles, and who comes up?
It's our lampshade-wearing friend from the past, with 20 years added to her lifespan, Mrs. Prolificate.
Yep, I mean,
I couldn't have recognized her.
I once you see it, I'm like, okay, maybe I can see how that's.
She wasn't wearing a lampshade, which
she wasn't wearing a lampshade. She's her hair's changed with the styles and with age. I mean, none of us would look great if you saw us and then saw us again 20 years later. She's the telephone operator, apparently.
Yeah, she's the royal telephone operator, and she comes in and says, "Hey, King Friday, is this what you wanted?" And he says, "What is that?"
And rightly so.
And she says, "It's a baloney. Isn't that what you asked for?"
You wanted a baloney balcony. And I guess the bit is telephone operator can't hear so good.
It's like a game of telephone.
King Friday's like, no, I don't want a baloney. I want a bubble balcony. Obviously. I didn't want something crazy like a baloney balcony. I wanted something sensible like a bubble balcony. I think he also says that he never stoops so low as to eat baloney. Oh,
I don't remember that. Later, at the end of this scene, he tells Miss Prolificate to go feed the elves behind the castle.
You may give it to the elves out back.
Yeah.
So I guess there's elves who live out behind the castle.
Who eat whatever scraps the kingdom.
Yeah, like, do you think they're, like, homeless and living behind the castle? Or do you think they're, like, the way you might have raccoons in your backyard? There's elves in the backyard.
I guess we won't know until we meet one.
I guess. I get the feeling that they are rodentia, or thereabouts.
After a longer than is necessary discussion about baloney, Mrs. Prolificate remembers that she has a phone call. She has a telephone. She has a telephone landline in her hand, which she just remembers is a phone call. Maybe she carries this around constantly.
I mean, she's the telephone operator.
So she hands King Friday the phone.
Yeah, and it's a phone call from his good friend
Reardon.
I always can count on you to write down the names.
Reardon is the Royal Opera manager.
Yeah, I think Mrs. Prolificate describes him as your opera guy or your opera man. So, he's King Friday wants an opera. That's the guy he gets.
Well, King Friday didn't ask for an opera. I think Reardon just
had some time on his hands.
He suggested,
you want to do an opera?
And
King Friday always down for a good opera.
Cleans out his schedule.
Yeah. He's like, yeah, an opera would be great. I'm thinking Bubbles maybe. It's a real say what you see kind of brainstorming for this opera.
And while he's on the phone with Reardon, Joe Negri and Mrs. Prolificate are just like blowing bubbles at his face. I was just waiting for him to say, to call them out, like, hey, stop that.
I'm on the phone here. Adults are talking.
They were being very childish.
Yeah.
So as soon as the phone call's over, Miss Prolificate jumps right into an audition for the opera, I think.
Yeah. She sings about how first she says she's a telephone operator for the king. And then Joe Negri says, well, there might not need to be a telephone operator in this opera. Which, in retrospect, it is interesting that is where they find issue.
That's where the line is drawn. Because,
telephone operator is, well, I don't know if we need a telephone operator. Let me tell you, every other idea is in immediately.
Yeah,
telephone operator somehow is the bridge too far.
Yeah. We'll get to those later, but
oh boy, will we.
As we progress throughout the land of make-believe, it's basically running through who each member of the kingdom wants to play.
We cover a lot of ground. before Miss Prolificate heads off to feed the elves, there's another phone call. This one's from Lady Elaine Fairchild for Joe Negri.
Yeah.
Joe Negri heads over to see Lady Elaine Fairchild.
Mm-hmm.
She hollers at him to hurry up when he dawdles for a second, because he called a second ago. Hurry up. So then we see Lady Elaine Fairchild.
Yes, and she called Joe Negri over for the express purpose of requesting a part. I don't know if Negri's in charge of casting, but...
I mean, he's a handy man.
I guess.
He was handy.
She says that...
King's not going to handle all that stuff directly.
Lady Elaine Fairchild insists that she get to play a hummingbird.
Yeah, she wants to play
in
a
this
hummingbird.
a
ruby-throated hummingbird.
Yeah, and at first I was like, why does she want to play a hummingbird? And then I realized if it's an opera about bubbles,
yeah,
the hummingbird is the natural villain of the piece.
Just wants to pop them.
Real interested in being the villain.
Yeah. Yeah, she
possible.
also, Handyman Joe Negri asks how she knew about the opera, which was arranged mere seconds ago across town. And she says she keeps her eyes and ears open.
No,
basically.
she says, well, what I do.
Oh, right.
And then she does a callback to Mr. Rogers' song. She says, well, what I do is I look carefully and listen.
Yeah, right. Which is, on one hand, it's like I'm watching everything, but also it's like I even know about this stuff that happened to Mr. Rogers
in the
earlier
real
today.
world, yeah.
Yeah. So she's on the ball. Eyes and ears everywhere, Lady Elaine Fairchild. Hildegard is the name of the hummingbird she wants to play.
Yes. And Joe talks about in the last opera, which we haven't watched.
We didn't get to see the last opera.
But apparently he was a bull named Jobel.
Yeah, or Jobel.
And now they're thinking maybe for this opera he'll be Joe Bubble.
Yeah.
Lady Elaine Fairchild says, well, that'll work out great because then in the opera I'll be able to pop you.
Yeah, that sounds fine.
He's not sure how he's going to be a bubble.
But as King Friday always says, in the land of make-believe, anything's possible.
Right.
I feel like that's on like their signs and their postcards and their tourism brochures.
So after that we have another scene full of more new characters.
Joe Negri's walking away from the museum go-round, and he runs into a new neighbor, I guess.
Named Clemens?
Yeah, Mr. Clemens, I think.
He's on his way to see Daniel Tiger. Clemens is.
And he wants to borrow the bubble apparatus.
Right.
Bubble equipment is what it's called in the episode, which is equally ridiculous as the thing that I said to be funny.
Yeah, you got to be wearing your proper PPE before you handle the bubble equipment.
Yeah.
So he takes the bubble equipment over to Daniel Tiger's clock.
It's convenient timing because it sounds like they were sort of talking about bubbles earlier. It's like, I should show you something with bubbles later, Daniel Tiger. And wouldn't you know it, Handyman Joe Negri, next day, is blowing bubbles for the king.
Mm-hmm.
So he borrows the bubble equipment.
So they're chatting a bit about the opera and a bit about bubbles in general.
So they blow some bubbles.
Daniel Tiger blows bubbles.
To
the surprise of everyone. They sort of there's like he starts blowing and nothing's happening.
And I'm like, oh boy, this is gonna go bad.
You don't have lungs, Daniel.
But
and then they pull a fast one on you and the bubbles start blowing.
Yeah, looks like a little hose in his...
Oh, I didn't see the apparatus.
No, yeah, I think he's got a little hose coming out of like his paw. Because you'll notice he sort of points his paw, that would be the puppeteer's thumb, out in front of him to blow bubbles. And it's a good trick. That's some Muppet Show stuff.
Yeah, the Muppet Show showed up on the scene around this time and really had to step up their game with their...
Mr. Rogers like, oh boy, we gotta up our game.
So Daniel Tiger blows some bubbles and he remarks that none of the bubbles that he's blowing are orange and black.
Which, I don't know what you were expecting, Daniel Tiger.
Yeah.
How do you know about bubbles but not know that they aren't the color that you are?
Well, Daniel Tiger isn't really orange and black. I wrote down
That's true too. He's more
Daniel
of a tabby.
Tiger is beige and darker beige.
I mean, if his name wasn't Daniel Tiger, we would all call him Daniel Cat.
Yes.
And it was interesting because like Mr. Clemens shows up on the scene, and it is, I mean, the first thing you notice about him is like, oh, okay, they've got a black person on this show now.
About time.
It is noteworthy.
I mean, they had African American guests on the show.
That's true. They've had kids
but
on.
In the episodes that we had seen, there weren't any in the land of make-believe.
This is the first bona fide neighbor
of make-believe.
who shows up, and so you think about, and then in the end, his first bit that we're seeing from him, anyways, he's presumably been established elsewhere, and I hope they've been giving him more to do than just
talking about race.
Talking about race and how
so
people.
Yeah, he blows bubbles after Daniel Tiger and says, "See, my bubbles aren't black, and your bubbles aren't orange and black. That is not how bubbles work.
Not how bubbles work."
And he talks about how with Daniel Tiger about how people can be very different on the outside, but they're all very similar on the inside,
and how bubbles. There's this weird little bit where he talks about how because bubbles aren't related to what's on the outside, they're made by what's on the inside.
Yeah.
Air. It's a very literal approach to
we're all different on the outside,
metaphorical concept.
But we all have lungs on the inside.
We all have basically the same organs.
Yeah.
And oxygen and chemical. Although Daniel Tiger,
who knows what's in there? A hand.
At minimum, he's a small tiger on the inside.
Yeah.
Which is fairly different.
So Clemens says, I really enjoy talking about personal things with you, Daniel. And then he immediately transitions to, by the way, I want to be a porpoise in the opera.
Yeah, I think I'd like to be a porpoise in this opera, which is wild.
Like, the segue from race to I want to be a porpoise was...
immediate.
I really enjoyed
on a dime
talking about personal things with you. I want to be a porpoise.
Mr. Clemens is all about
porpoises,
equality, and porpoises.
Those are his two things.
Yeah.
When he's not talking about race, he's teaching us about aquatic mammals.
And he sort of waxes poetic about porpoises for a bit, and how they're, because Daniel Tiger's like, you mean a fish? He's like, well, they look like fish, but actually they're a lot like us in that they breathe air and think and communicate.
They look like a fish on the outside.
Yeah, right. So, I mean, maybe he may be the only person that I know of who has taken porpoises as a symbol for
equality of man.
Yeah.
I guess the Land of Make-Believe ends with Clemens running back into Prolificate, and we're full circle back at the castle.
Yeah, one thing that I thought was nice is as he's saying goodbye to Daniel Tiger, he calls him Brother Tiger. Which I'm like, all right. I mean,
he's part black. Part orange, part black.
I just thought it was unusually, I guess, hip.
Yeah.
For Missy. Like, that's the sort of stuff you maybe expect from Sesame Street, which is very urban and inner city.
We've got a lot of old characters on Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, like Fred Rogers and Mrs. Prolificate. They got to bring some new blood in.
Yeah. So they got
bring the new lingo in, so that we aren't all talking about false faces and.
Right. True enough.
So Clemens tells Mrs. Prolificate the good news that he's going to be a porpoise, although Reardon isn't here yet to even announce who's getting what parts, so
that's true.
We don't really know who's going to play what.
I think they say as much. Like, we guess we've got to wait for Reardon to show up before we can really
maybe next week
settle on
maybe
anything.
Next week Reardon is going to come and say, no, this is going to be a normal opera.
We're doing The Ring, you guys. We're doing The Ring. Although he does say, what opera wouldn't be improved by bubbles and porpoises? No, you know what? I think that's Lady Elaine Fairchild.
Yeah, she says what opera wouldn't be improved by hummingbirds?
Yeah, by a hummingbird and some bubbles. Mm-hmm. I'm like, all right. I guess that's an approach.
So that about does it for the Land of Make-Believe.
Yeah.
We did a full lap around.
We did a whole thing. We traded off people like 2 or 3 times.
We had, let's see.
3 people, 3 puppets.
Yeah.
3 people, 3 puppets.
3
and
people.
The trolley.
3 puppets.
A trolley and a pizza place.
Yeah.
The 90s. Actually, I think the early 2000s.
Yeah, so here we are at Mr. Rogers' house.
That was quick.
He's still blowing bubbles.
He's forever blowing bubbles.
Mm-hmm. First, Mr. Rogers is talking about how bubbles don't last forever, which made me think of something I saw while I was on holiday. I was in a little gas station / convenience store.
Right.
And there was this little TV that was advertising Forever Bubbles, and it was like bubble solution, and you blow and they stay alive for longer than a bubble normally would, which I thought was kind of unnerving. I was like, I
think we had those.
I don't want bubbles to stay alive.
Or, the beta version of those bubbles at one point.
Like, what are you you're making hundreds of bubbles. What are you going to do with these bubbles if they all still alive?
I mean, I think the big thing is they sort of like sit on stuff and you can hold them. That's exciting.
But then you have to dispose of them.
You just sort of, and they're gone.
Then they don't last forever.
No, they don't.
Mr. Rogers was right.
I don't know what the advertising standards are over in England, but They probably last for forever, asterisk.
Yeah, Mr. Rogers ponders which characters everyone might be playing in the...
Yeah, he says, well, we need to think of somebody for Lady Averlin to play, because she loves being in operas. I don't know why Lady Averlin doesn't get to decide who she gets to play in the opera, since there was clearly no wrong answer in brainstorming.
Yeah, he asks, who do you think Reardon is going to play? Who's he going to cast himself
Yeah, who's he
as?
going to want to play in his opera?
And he also asks who you would play. So, Andrew, who would you be in this?
Oh, wow. Okay, so we know it's about Bubbles.
Mm-hmm.
We've got Hildegard the Hummingbird, who I'm going to say is at least a partial antagonist character. We've got the Porpoise, who I'm going to say is probably going to be named Clemens.
Clemens Porpoise.
Yeah. That seems to be the naming scheme for most people.
In the land of make-believe.
In the land of make-believe is...
Name, rank, and species.
Yeah, for the land of make-believe, they very seldom make-believe good names. Yeah. That's why Lady Elaine Fairchild is so great, because she comes up with Hildegard.
Correct, as usual.
Yeah. I don't know who I would. I guess this is hard.
You could be anybody.
I know. That's what's so hard about it. I don't know. A robot? Is that too?
I want to play Daniel Tiger from the future.
Whoa, that's some heavy stuff. It's in because he's got a real time fixation.
We don't know who Daniel Tiger's going to play, but hopefully he plays himself, and I can play his.
Well, maybe if he plays somebody, he probably won't play himself. So maybe I can play Daniel Tiger from the present.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, good luck, Reardon, working all that in.
Do you think we should be playing Daniel Tiger because we're not orange and black?
But I think what matters is what's on the inside, and what's on the inside.
I'm just saying that there are a lot of out of work.
A hand.
There are a lot of out of work
that's
black and
true.
orange,
True.
actors who could be in this opera.
You make a good point. It's probably
Tony the Tiger. What's he up to?
Yeah.
Mr. Rogers goes over and feeds the fish.
Yep. He quizzes us.
He says, "What are these?"
Quiz. Yeah. You think you're so smart? You've been paying attention for these 30 years of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood? What are these things we keep feeding all the time, huh?
I guess I have no idea.
I don't know.
I just don't want to stop feeding them because I don't know what'll happen.
It's our responsibility. It's our sacred duty. They're fish, as it turns out.
Mm-hmm. I made a mistake in our last episode. I said
corrections.
This is a bit now?
This is our correction segment where we correct things we did wrong in the last episode.
The thing I did wrong in the last episode is I suggested that the week ended with a shortened version of our usual ending song. But that actually was not true. Up until now, we've had the song Tomorrow.
We'll start the day tomorrow with a song.
That's the one. And actually what we ended with last week, rather than doing Tomorrow on a Friday, they sang a different song that didn't lie to the children
about when he would be back.
Which was what would later become, now in the 80s, the Good Feeling song, which he ends every episode with.
Also, we're assuming a lot about the trends of this show based on exactly 2 Fridays that we've seen.
Yes, it's true.
And while we're in a correction segment, the things I got wrong in the last episode, I went on too many tangents, and I messed up the outro too many times, and Steven had to edit it.
All right. Well, yeah. I'm glad we.
Also, I scooted in my chair a bunch and made a lot of mic noise. And I cut you off.
I'll find it in my heart.
And I kept doing my running bits for too long.
I'll find it in my heart to forgive you.
All right.
So where do you think this week's story is going to go?
I don't know. So here's the thing. I remember seeing an opera.
I seem to
in my childhood. I remember that opera being about wind. And I think like an aerosol spray can. Now I may be thinking of the sequel that was made to Frosty the Snowman later on, where they had the aerosol spray that got rid of snow. But I remember there being a wind guy who turned into wind. But maybe he turned into snow. You know what's
an aerosol spray that would get rid of snow is just like salt. Salt would melt snow.
Or just like any aerosol.
Yeah.
Because global. Remember when it was all about the ozone layer? You don't hear about the ozone layer anymore.
No.
It's just straight up global warming. I don't know if we solved the ozone layer problem and now we have other global warming issues.
We don't have any ozone anymore. That's why there's no hole in it.
That's why there's no Frosty the Snowman. But yeah, so I'm curious. I feel like that could still be this opera that we're leading up to.
Well, I do have vague memories of seeing Lady Elaine Fairchild dressed as a hummingbird.
Oh, I think I do too.
So I think she will get her wish.
Does your memory have cat's eye glasses?
I mean, it does now that you've planted that.
Well, we'll find out.
I think that she's probably going to be an antagonist in the opera and in the effort to make the opera happen.
Oh, you think she's going to be like a real diva about it?
I think that she's probably going to be more interested in her role of destroying Bubbles than everyone else having their fair share of time in the spotlight.
I kind of wonder if maybe she'll be like a real... I think she might be on board for this project. Yeah, no, because I think the opera show's up Friday. So we've got 4
days of preparation.
3 more days now of opera preparation. Mm-hmm. And I kind of wonder if it's going to be like sort of a conflict-free week.
Think?
Like maybe there won't be any like huge internal struggle. It'll just be sort of like some friends making an opera.
Maybe. I think Lady Elaine might be a troublemaker this week. Maybe. But that might just be my hope.
I mean, maybe we'll get like Phantom of the Opera.
But I mean, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood does more than one opera over the course of its run. It's kind of a recurring bit. It's like the paintball of Community, the opera of Mr. Rogers. I think happens on a fairly regular basis.
I think there's like 10 of them or something. Yeah. So not quite yearly because there were 31 seasons.
I mean, like you think it would be opera related, but if they've done a number of operas, they have to kind of branch out into the many aspects of opera conflict. So next week we will be back with episode 1472.
1472.
Which will be Volume 1, Episode 12 on the Amazon collection.
It'll be Tuesday for Mr. Rogers. It'll be Monday for you guys.
Or Sunday, if you're fast enough.
Yeah, that's true. Sunday night. Or you'll just live in a different time zone.
Who knows where you're at.
Yeah.
We have a Tumblr.
We have a Tumblr. We do. Good stuff on that Tumblr, Steven.
It's pleasewon'tyoubemine.tumblr.com.
Yeah, so if you want to see a picture of Mr. Rogers' crazy belt,
go there. Then you'll know how crazy it is.
Yeah, if you want to see a puppet blowing bubbles, a wonder never before seen in these worlds.
Or if you're already familiar with the episode, we'll have supplementary materials to what we've talked about.
Yeah.
Anything that could benefit from a visual, I'll try to include it on the... Yeah. That'll go up probably a couple days after the episode of the podcast. Our theme song was provided by Dan Brisbane.
Good old Danny B. Way to be, Danny B.
And our trolley transition tune was made by Rhindale.
Good old R.E.D.
Red.
Way to be, R.E.D.
We'll be back when the week is new, and we'll have more ideas for you.
So many more ideas about porpoises.
Among other things.
Like hummingbirds.
Andrew, you've already demonstrated that you'll have things you'll want to talk about.
Bubbles, baby.
And I will too.
So let's make the most of this beautiful day. Since we're together, we might as well say, would you be mine? Could you be mine? Won't you please? Won't you please? Please, won't you be my neighbor? Won't you please? Won't you please? Please, won't you be my podcast?
Oh, I heard a story in which a king got inside a bubble. I think that would be amusing.
But that story's just pretend, King Friday.
So are we, Handyman Negri.